Thanks for staying with us on South Africa Tonight. Let's turn our attention to the United States now, where the world is holding its breath ahead of the U.S. general election. President Donald Trump is up against Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. We speak to a former Democratic Alliance politician about why this should matter to South Africans. Joined by Dr. Wilmot James, who's the Senior Research Fellow at Columbia University. Dr. Wilmot, thanks a lot for joining us this evening. Certainly, the tides have changed when it comes to the way in which we used to, or even the United States used to see itself selecting its candidates, as well as the lead up and the build up until November 3rd. Now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, it would appear as though we're not going to have those jamborees as we always anticipate. Hi, Dr. James. Can you hear me? Are you still with us?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, great stuff. So obviously it's business unusual when it comes to the way in which, the build-up to the elections, the build-up to November 3rd. We're not going to see the same crowds. We're not going to experience the same euphoria, as well as posing a certain discontent amongst the candidates who now have to find more innovative ways of wooing voters.
So good evening to the South African viewers. So I'm very pleased to be on the program with you. The fact is that why this election matters clearly has to do with the US's leadership role in all areas of global life: trade, investment, health, security, and so on and so forth. And therefore, who is responsible for what happens to the direction of the US matters enormously. And so it is of the greatest importance to everybody else to see that the consequences of this election actually is beneficial for the world. And so there's a great deal at stake here. It's monumental. And I think that the next 3 weeks are going to be probably the most important period we've seen in a long time.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking here about how the rest of, one would say that when America sneezes, the entire world catches a cold. And we'll speak a little bit about foreign policy as well as why is it that this particular election is so significant. But let's talk a little bit about the two candidates. Where are they at, just in terms of the polling favor?
I mean, presently, if you look at all the statistics across the board and the polling numbers, Joe Biden leads in some cases by extraordinary margin. In double digits, and in other cases in the mid to upper reaches of 8 or 9. That includes polls done by Fox News. So he's in the lead in terms of the polls. Polls are good, but we saw what happened in the last election, so there's a level of uncertainty there. What matters here in terms of the Democrats is turnout. And compared to South Africa, US turnout is low. Usually you can see 50% turnout. We expect a much higher turnout if you compare the last congressional elections of 2 years ago to today and the level of mobilization. So the odds are stacked in favor of Joe Biden. And Donald Trump right now is just simply scrambling to see whether he can bridge the gap in 3 weeks. My prognosis is that he will struggle to do that.
I mean, right now the spotlight is on President Donald Trump simply because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the way in which many Americans are saying that, look, how he handled it was not to the betterment of the country as a whole. But it would look as though President Donald Trump is continuing to propose a rhetoric where he sees himself as being at the front line of COVID-19. I mean, even saying that at some stages that he's even immune to it. The question is, are Americans buying into his narrative? Is the narrative working in his favor right now?
Presently, in terms of the narrative around managing the COVID-19 pandemic, it is not in his favor. He's stumbled, he has bumbled, he has mismanaged it, and it's cost America in a very visible way. You know, it's not something you can just spin away. Lives have been lost, over 200,000 in the case of the US. There's a spike right now that's ongoing in the Midwest. And it's clearly visible to anybody who cares about these things and cares about lives that it's spiking. And so the narrative is simply not working. It's a spin, it's a rhetoric, and it belies the factual record, both in terms of what the scientists are saying, but also in terms of public perception.
I mean, when we're looking at the fact that right now, they will say that the United States relationship with the rest of the African continent is almost non-existent. I mean, even if you have to look at, for example, the AGOA agreement, many would say, what's the AGOA agreement under the President Donald Trump administration? Under Joe Biden, will they be looking, or the administration be looking to revive such agreements? And maybe not even revive, but really make sure that it's an implementable agreement amongst all parties and members that are involved?
You need to ask the Biden campaign a question. All I can give you is my impression, and I want to say that it's not just AGOA. There's a whole series of agreements and conventions and bilateral relationship issues that affects the African continent, from health to security to trade to investment and to a range of other issues. And that has been under management by the administration as opposed to the White House. So you must really separate what Donald Trump does in the White House and what the U.S. administration, the civil servants, do. And as an effort, he's done a lot of damage to what's happened in the State Department, what's happened in those areas that affect foreign affairs. He's done a lot of damage, poor appointments, not filling proper appointments. So the people who have been there have been trying to keep things going in a way that has some kind of steady state effect. So it's not that the U.S. has no presence in Africa, for example. I work with the Africa Center for Disease Control very directly, and we work with the U.S. Center for Disease Control and with the U.S. Department of Defense. And those are ongoing, strong sets of relationship bolstering pandemic response in Africa. So it's not simply a question that the U.S. does not have a presence in the U.S. What we want to see after the Biden election is a strengthening of those relationships. There has to be a lot of recovery that happens, a rebuilding. It's going to be monumental. And we look forward to a time, hopefully, when the relationships between the U.S. and Africa, in fact, get back to not where it was, but at least on a much better footing looking into the future.
Well, as you've rightly said, Dr. Wilmot, is the fact that, unfortunately, it's not over until it's over, and November 3rd will be the telling, in terms of exactly what does foreign policy look like for the United States, especially where the continent is concerned. And most importantly, I guess the big question is, why should South Africans care? Dr. Wilmot James, who's a senior research fellow at Columbia University.